Sir, what's your opinion on booster cookies?
Booster cookies? Back in my day we paid with emeralds and good manners. But now 13 million coins?
Yep, that's about the average reaction when people are faced with the continuously rising prices in SkyBlock. The issue we all seem to encounter, whether in a video game or currently in real life, is known as inflation. Now, I'm guessing everyone who played SkyBlock this year is familiar with the term inflation, but just in case, here's a short definition. Inflation is a general increase in prices in an economy and consequent fall in the purchasing value of money. Now, just to be clear, this doesn't mean that the more money circulating in an economy directly translates to inflation. For it to be called inflation, both boxes have to be ticked, meaning we also need an increase in price level. Now, in SkyBlock, people like to portray the horrors of inflation based off of booster cookie prices, so let's take a look at that. We can see they started off at roughly 1 million coins, but then over a year gradually increased to around 3 million, where they hit a plateau. In 2023, they started rising once again and haven't stopped since. When looking at this graph, it seems like the worst inflation happened halfway through 2024. But that's not true, since the price increase isn't just measured as the difference, but rather as a multiplier, which means we can expect these exponential price increases. And this is what makes the recent surges feel even more dramatic than they actually are. If we now look at the change rates in percent, we see them rise up to about 70% in 2021 and 40% over a longer period of time in 2023, which in the real world economy is already considered the beginning of hyperinflation. At this point, governments would already be on high alert, dedicating all their resources to fixing these inflation rates. But then, why aren't SkyBlock players panicking at this level? Sure, it's probably also because this is just a video game and not meant to be taken so seriously. I'm looking at you, yes. But apart from that, it suggests an inherent flaw in the methods we use to portray SkyBlock's inflation. But what's so wrong about measuring using with the booster cookie? And how is it actually done in reality? Well, to better understand how we measure inflation in the real world, let's look at the Consumer Price Index, short CPI. It uses the prices of a select basket of goods that reflect on typical consumption onto what we call the price level of an economy. This would include goods and services such as gas, clothes, streaming services, houses, blah blah blah, you get the idea. The reason we look at a basket of goods instead of a single item is to reduce short-term fluctuation and general volatility in the price level. Here we run into our first problem though, because while the booster cookie definitely tries to resemble typical consumption, as it is the source of many important items in the game, its supply is still too dependent on the players purchasing these cookies with real-life money, allowing factors from outside the SkyBlock economy to reflect on the booster cookie prices. What if SkyBlock started to offer more and more attractive alternatives for converting gems into in-game coins? Oh, right, that's exactly what they've done, by heavily increasing the amount of fire sales. Fire sales tend to offer better exchange rates than booster cookies do, which do of course negatively affect the supply of these booster cookies and therefore raises their price. Okay, so we've established that booster cookies fail to offer an accurate representation of SkyBlock's inflation. But what now? Can't we just put together our own SkyBlock CPI, measure the actual inflation rates, and be done with it? Well, the problem is creating and especially keeping the CPI up to date is easier said than done, and unfortunately I don't have the time nor the resources to do that right now. The best thing we can do now is just to estimate and simplify. One factor complicating these estimates is the NPC sell value. Have you noticed that some items seem to be unaffected by inflation? That's often thanks to the NPC sell value, which acts as a safety net to prevent prices from dropping too low. Normally, prices are set by supply and demand, which act like a seesaw. Prices balance when the quantity supplied matches the quantity demanded. That's the sweet spot right here, called the equilibrium. But in SkyBlock, most items have NPC sell values indicated by this horizontal line, meaning they are not traded at their equilibrium. Take enchanted diamond blocks, for example. If more coins circulate and the demand increases, the equilibrium price may rise, but as long as it stays below this line, the market price remains unaffected. Now this explains why some items seem to be immune to inflation. This does mean though that eventually with enough inflation more and more items will be traded above their NPC sell value. Then inflation actually becomes real and starts to affect every single price. Just imagine a hot potato book for 200,000 coins. Obviously not every item is still traded at this line, yet this phenomenon still applies to roughly a third of all items sold on the bazaar that still have NPC sell values. We also have to take into account that the developers have much more control over SkyBlock's economy than the central banks do over a country's economy. A great example for this is Crimson Essence. Everyone has a need for it as it upgrades the best armor sets outside of dungeons, and we can see that in the price. When Kudra was first released and Crimson Essence was added to the bazaar, it was traded at roughly 13,000 coins each. Once the entire Kudra fight was revamped, not only did the higher tiers giving more and more essence release, but the essence yields of all tiers were significantly buffed as well, causing the price level of Crimson Essence to drop to below 2,000 coins, and since it's such an important resource, it would have a decent impact on the general price level of SkyBlock's economy. Now this means that developers can update the game accordingly to increase or decrease this price level. Alright, now let's take all of this into account and create a very simple estimate of a possible SkyBlock CPI. For this, let me introduce you to Salty Lego. He is supposed to resemble the average SkyBlock player, thus his spending habits are very vague. For every booster cookie he buys, he also buys 5 Titanic XP bottles, 2 power crystals for his beacon, 400 Crimson Essence, 1 Recombobulator, 1 Ultimate Wise Book 5, 1 Flawless Jasper, and then for his minions 1 Hypergolic Gabagool. If we sum everything up in a chart, this is how much money the basket would cost him throughout the last 2 years. As a reference, here is the price of Booster Cookie in the same time span. Now, of course, the basket still shows an upwards trend like we have with the Booster Cookie, but in comparison, it's way less steep. And of course, we can also look at the change rates again, and we'll see the basket's rates are in fact much lower than the Booster Cookie's rates. Now sure, this may not be a very accurate representation, but it approaches reality much further than simply focusing on just the Booster Cookie prices. All in all, this video shows us that inflation happens across SkyBlock's entire economy and doesn't just affect one single item. Due to the overwhelming complexity of the economy, many factors can change the prices of items, and inflation is just one of them. Alright, that was it for today though. Let me know what you think of these more educational videos. I really had a lot of fun making this. And if you enjoyed, obviously don't forget to like and subscribe. And other than that, see you next time. Goodbye.